Hello, writehive, and thank you for joining our panel, Writing Effective Courtroom Scenes. My name is Stephanie, and I will be the panel moderator slash judge today. I have two expert panelists here to discuss everything we need to know on this topic. So if you have any questions for them, please drop them in the chat and we'll make sure to answer them. First, let me introduce you to our experts. We have Lori B. Duff, who is a lawyer, judge, and award-winning writer. She's a past president of the Georgia Council for Municipal Court Judges and the National Society of Newspaper Columnists, a two-time winner for the Georgia Bar Journal's annual fiction competition. She also has won the Forward Indies Gold Medal for Humor, the NSNC's annual column contest, and the CMU CJ's President's Award, as well as the Glenn Ashman Educational Achievement Award. Her novel, Devil's Defense, is a finalist in the American Book Fest Best Book Awards in the general fiction and thriller adventure categories. Her novella, Broken Things, won the Georgia Independent Author of the Year Award for literary fiction. When she's not busy being in charge of things and winning awards, she's either at home in her empty nest with her husband Mike and rescue dog Lincoln, or working on a new writing project. Thank you for joining us, Lori.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
And our next panelist, Melati Lum, is the author of the Aisha Dean Mysteries series for middle graders, with work published in Liminal Magazine and SBS Voices. She is a former criminal law prosecutor of major crime who now spends time thinking up fictional offenses and misdeeds. Under her independent label, Melby Rose Publishing, she has published the debut middle grade adventure novel by Annie McCann, My Haramu King, is adapting one of her books into a manga and has released a number of coloring books. In 2024, she was shortlisted for the South Australian Literary Fellowship. Welcome to the panel, Melati.
Thank you very much.
Okay, panelists, so we've come together to talk about writing effective courtroom scenes. So why don't we go ahead and get to our questions? You both have experience in the courtroom, as we can testify from your bios. Can you briefly talk a little bit more about that and paint us a picture of what your time in law is or was like? Lori, if you'd like, we can start with you.
Okay. Well, I'm still a practicing lawyer. I've been a lawyer since 1994, which feels like the dawn of time. It was forever ago. I started out as a prosecutor. I did that for 10 years. Then I went out in private practice. I've done more or less everything there is to do in a courtroom. I've been a prosecutor. I've been a defense attorney. I've practiced civil law. I've done divorces. I've done business cases. I've been a municipal court judge, which is a part-time position, since 2012. So I got quite a bit of experience in a courtroom, which I'm now turning into my writing career.
A lot of great experience. Thank you. How about for you, Melati?
I have mainly concentrated in criminal prosecution. So I've done everything within the prosecution from the early stages of when charges are first made and going into the whole process up until trial. In South Australia, we still have jury trials for prosecution, and unless someone wants to choose a judge alone trial. So mainly the major crimes, some of also in my later years, some of the more lesser crimes when I wanted to get away from major crimes. I prosecuted war crimes in an international tribunal as well. So,
Wow.
Very long time ago. So yeah, that's my experience.
So now, have you both written courtroom scenes yourself? And if so, can you allegedly tell us if any actual cases you witnessed might have somehow influenced your stories, if they were fiction stories? Melati, do you mind starting?
So my series that's currently published is a middle grade series. So it's for preteens and early teenagers. I have written one courtroom scene in one of the later books. It's called The Lisbon Lawbreaker. And that was based on some of the early stages of a prosecution in my jurisdiction. And in that case, or in my scene, it was actually in the lower courts where the major crimes do start out, when you're trying to figure out bail issues or whether or not there's enough for a case to answer. And so that scene was directly taken from any experience in that lower court when you're first starting out with a crime. So yes, I had to tailor it to a preteen, early teen audience, but it is, I think, is quite realistic of what actually happens in those lower court scenes.
Awesome. Thank you. Lori, how about for you?
Well, I'm currently working on a series, which is a courtroom drama. I call it the Fisher at Law series. The protagonist is a woman named Jessica Fisher, who's a young female lawyer who is working in the rural South of the United States, which is not always the greatest place for a young woman to be working. But so there's any number of courtroom scenes in those books. They center around a court case and her client handling and the way her clients treat her and the way she has to interact with her clients, and then her taking them to trial. So yes, there's a good bit of courtroom action in those books. And
Awesome.
they are not taken directly from anything that I've done, although they are, I don't want any of my clients or people that I've dealt with in my professional life to think that I'm stealing from them or taking their lives and putting them on paper. But it's impossible to do that job for 31 years and not have that experience color how you write about it. That, I know how everyone in the room would react when somebody would say X. If this happens, then this is going to happen. And so I like to think that they're very realistic because they mirror my experiences in those settings.
That makes perfect sense. So, as someone who is consuming media, what is your favorite part about courtroom scenes in stories that you have read or maybe watched? Lori, I can stay with you.
Okay. Rarely do I like or watch courtroom movies or TV shows. They tend to frustrate me because they're so far out of the realm of reality. And that's part of what inspired me to write my series. Was I wanted to, Toni Morrison, I think, who said, if you don't see the book you want to read, then you have to write it. And I wanted to have something out there that accurately reflected what it was like. You don't always, or even usually, like your client. You don't always get to fight for the side of right. Sometimes you're fighting for the side of wrong, but that's your job. You have to do what you're paid to do. And your clients don't always listen to you, and they don't always do what they're supposed to do. And I wanted to write something that reflected that. And when you watch these things on TV or read about them, everyone seems to be just impossibly beautiful, and all their clients are right. And even if they don't seem to be in the beginning, in the end, everybody's just victorious, and everything turns out to be just truth and justice prevails, which is just not at all the way the system works. So I tend to get very frustrated with the vast majority of media. Now, that said, there are some shows that I like, some movies that I like. My all-time favorite lawyer movie is My Cousin Vinny. As silly as it is, it gets a lot of the law right. The writers behind it were, I don't know if they're still alive, but anyway, they are lawyers. Just a little bit of personal connection to it. It was filmed in the courthouse near me. You could see when they're standing outside at the end, the names on the wall. I know those people because they're the judges that I work with. I even know some of the extras and the actors that were in it. But I think that movie is done very well. And I teach open records to the clerks of court around here, and I use clips of that movie to teach with, because I think they got it that dead on accurate. I love that movie.
That's awesome. I love it too. How about for you, Melati?
I'm the same as Laurie. I just can't, like, since I've been in this profession, I can't actually find enjoyment or too much enjoyment from. I don't actually go towards when I'm trying to relax or wind down. I'm not going to turn on a courtroom drama because, again, it does frustrate me, and I just find it. Also, I'm reminded of work, so I don't really want to, when I'm trying to wind down, I don't want to go into something that's going to remind me of my work in any way. So I do tend to stay away from courtroom scenes and things like that. So having said that, I quite enjoy when a courtroom scene is actually done in a comedic kind of way. So, for example, there was one scene in 30 Rock, the sitcom, and she's just trying to get out of the main character is trying to get out of jury duty. So she dresses up as Princess Leia and walks in, and immediately, they're like, nah, you got to go. So and same in that same sitcom, there's another time when it's I can't remember the reason, maybe it was April Fool's Day or something like that, and the typist stenographer is dressed up in this spider costume, and it's just so out of, kind of like completely out of what would happen in reality, that I actually do enjoy it because it's not trying to be necessarily correct, it's just trying to be funny. And so they're the types of courtroom scenes that I really enjoy.
I love that. Thank you. Okay, so thinking about maybe a story or a movie or a show where you felt like they really nailed the courtroom scene. Do you have any recommendations of something that one of our viewers could go to as a reference? Melati, I can stay with you.
I don't necessarily have one of courtroom scene, but when it comes to police procedurals and crime fiction, I really enjoyed the series by Asma Zehanat Khan. She's a Canadian author. She's done a couple of crime series. One is the Issa Khatak and Rachel Getty series, and her most recent series is Blackwater Falls. And in those series, she goes into a lot of the human rights issues and social justice issues that we either have faced historically or in the recent history, or even current. And I really enjoyed how she brought those aspects into her writing. In her latest series, she talks a lot about police corruption and brutality, which is obviously a huge issue, but she balances it out nicely with, people on the force who are doing what they're supposed to do on the force and trying to obtain justice. So I really like that aspect of it. She puts the human side of working in the industry, and she brings out all of those issues. So Asma Zehanat Khan is someone to, or is a series to look out for.
Okay, thank you. How about for you, Lori? I know you mentioned My Cousin Vinny.
Yeah, that is a great. That's my all-time favorite. For what it's worth, the Georgia Bar did during March Madness a couple of years ago, the basketball tournament. They did a bracket for legal movies, and with the bar, and My Cousin Vinny won, beat out all the others. I don't know, that's really all I have.
Okay.
I'm a lot like Melati. I don't watch that many because it's like going to work, and I don't go to work for pleasure.
Okay, well said. All right, so then what are some common misconceptions about court sessions that appear in stories? Do you mind starting that one, Lori?
Common misconceptions. Well, the most common misconception is that they're exciting. For the most part, they're boring. There are exciting moments, but there are just, I mean, literally hours of procedural nonsense. Even just getting a picture into evidence takes 5 minutes. What is this? Do you recognize this? Have there been any alterations to the picture? Does it accurately depict it? And there's all these background questions that you have to ask. And so court is phenomenally boring. If you sit in a real courtroom, it's not that exciting. It also moves very slowly, and it takes a long time. You watch Law and Order and you think, oh, well, to prosecute a case takes an hour or 3 years. Like 3 years is 2, 3 years for a high profile case is a lot more realistic. And then when you deal with people in the real world, they expect all this high tech forensics, and they expect all uh, things to move so quickly. And then 2.5 years later, when they finally get to trial, they don't understand why everything hasn't been fingerprinted. Well, that's not how it works in the real world. It just doesn't. And we don't all have the resources of NBC. It's it's just not the way it works. I think that answered your question.
It does. Thank you. Thank you,
Pretty
Lori.
minute.
How about for you, Melati? What would you say are some common misconceptions?
I think I'll echo Laurie's answer in that, the resources, like a lot of the time in the movies, you've got a lawyer and they've got a whole team of other lawyers who are supporting them, and a whole team of detectives who are on the case supporting them. And the reality is you just don't have all of those resources. Like most of the time, it's just me, one prosecutor on a case, and one detective who's looking after it. There will be other, obviously, police witnesses who were part of the crime scene and all of that, who come in and give evidence, but they're not helping you, put a case together. It's very, there's just a lot of things that you have to do on your own, and you don't have the support that you would like. That would be awesome for everyone to all of a sudden drop everything and work on this one case. It doesn't happen like that. You've usually got a whole bunch of other cases that are also in the pipeline and that you have to be worried about and working on at the same time. So resources is a big misconception. Also, the surprise witness that nobody knows about. It doesn't happen like that. You can't just all of a sudden pop a surprise witness in that none of the parties know about beforehand. It can't happen. It's one of those things. There's lots and lots of rules. The rules of evidence are a lot more restrictive than is kind of portrayed in a movie. So there's a lot of things that you wouldn't get away with doing in a real case. Mm-hmm. So those types of things. There was another one. The group police interview. I've seen that in or read that a few times, where police are doing an interview for either suspect or a witness, and there's a whole group of them and they're all kind of being asked questions, and it's kind of like a forum. That would just be, you just couldn't use that in a real case. You'd have trouble with getting that type of evidence in, it wouldn't. Yeah. So things like that, I think, are common misconceptions.
Those are very helpful. Thank you. So, as an author who is really wanting to get it right, how do tone, atmosphere, and emotions play into effective courtroom scenes? Can I start with you on that one, Melati?
Tone and emotions, it actually is that all comes into it. Like it is very emotional, obviously, for people, especially with you're dealing with serious crimes. You have a victim who has obviously, well, allegedly gone through a horrific experience, and then you've got their family and friends, and a lot of the time they're all part of the courtroom, and they're in the courtroom as well. And then on the accused side, you might have people supporting them who are also in the courtroom, who are also very emotional, because seeing their loved one being accused of a serious crime is very difficult and emotional thing. So I think emotion is there. It's there in a courtroom, in a real courtroom. So you can play on those emotions to get, when you're writing about it as well. For the lawyers or the court staff involved, obviously, then you do have to kind of tamper your emotions or switch them off. Like, I'm actually a very emotional person when it comes to like watching movies. I cry quite easily. And if someone's going through a hard time, I cry really easily. So, but when I'm being like when I'm working or in a prosecutor mode, I just have to kind of turn it all off. And it's like I go into a different persona, and I just can't. Obviously, I can't talk when I cry. So it's one of those things you just, as a prosecutor or court staff, you just need to turn it all off. But that's not to say you see a lot of emotion in the room. That's why there's always a tissue box in a room when you're proofing a witness. There's a lot of tears and a lot of emotion, a lot of crying. So that's something that you can definitely pick up on when you're writing a scene. The prosecutor in a lot of movies that I've seen emotionally involved, to the extent that they becomes like their story, and that's probably a bit unrealistic in the sense that in the real life, an advocate would not be putting their own emotions into a case. Like, you would look at it more objectively to do your job. You wouldn't be kind of getting all emotional about it. So in terms of writing emotion in a courtroom scene, the emotion will come from the victims and their families, and the accused and their families, but not the lawyer themselves, which you do see a lot in fiction.
Great, thank you. Lori, anything that you would add to that as well?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. My book, Devil's Defense, was written from the lawyer's perspective. So you can get into her head, and you can't get into anyone else's head. So you can see in the courtroom, you can hear what she's thinking, which is some pretty angry, mad stuff. And you can hear her wrestling control over those emotions, because she knows she's not allowed to show how pissed off she is at her client. That's one of the things that's hardest to do when you're a lawyer, is when you get in the courtroom and you find out something that you didn't know before stepping in that courtroom that you should have known, and the feelings that you have, and keeping that poker face. I think all lawyers, or at least good lawyers, are good poker players, because you have to learn how to have that mask that just betrays all the cussing that's going on in your head. And but there's an incredible amount of emotion, and the way to get at it when you're writing is perspective. So, you have the perspective of the lawyer, and what are they seeing, and what are they doing, and they're more strategic. Like, they aren't like Melati said, the lawyer is not the star of the show. The lawyer is more, I think of the courtroom when I'm bringing something to trial. I'm the director. I'm trying to be the director. I'm trying to set the stage so that the story gets told the way I want it to be told. But I'm not the star of the show. My client is the star of the show. And I'm just hoping that the actor acts the way I want them to. And that's the witness prep is I'm prepping them to speak in a certain way, to behave in a certain way, to answer questions in a certain way. And I just hope that in the final performance, they actually do that and don't go off the rails, which of course they do 90% of the time. But that's another story. Um, but but when I'm in the room, my thoughts are still my thoughts, and I'm still thinking that. So the way you can get at the drama of the lawyer without making the lawyer act unrealistically is by getting inside the lawyer's head. But everyone in the room has their own perspective. The judge may be sitting up there doing a crossword puzzle and not listening at all. The judge may be up there hating one of the people or thinking how much they remind him of that third grade gym teacher they had that made them fail to climb the rope in front of everyone and embarrass themselves, and is trying to fight that prejudice. And no one will ever know that. You can get some really interesting drama if you get into the heads of the people, which you can do when you're writing. You can't necessarily do that in a movie or a TV show, but that's the advantage of books, is you can get into people's heads. The deputy may be sitting there just watching people's jaws, because I have this theory. Every time I've seen someone go crazy in a courtroom and just start to get violent, every time I've seen it beforehand, their jaws work. They start. You see them. You could see it right here. And so that may be what he's looking for, or like you don't know, and so that's an interesting way to write it, is to just get in the heads and to get into different perspectives of the different people, because they all have a different way of looking at it. And the court reporter may just not even be listening to what's going on because she's so good at her job. She's been doing it for so many years that she can just type into the machine without even hearing it. And she may be thinking about lunch, or that she's got to pee or whatever. There's a million different perspectives. They're all fascinating.
Very fascinating. Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so what tips can you give to authors who want to write courtroom scenes more effectively? Lori, can you help us with some tips?
Go to court. In America, courts are open. You can walk into any courthouse any day of the week and just sit in a courtroom and see what's going on. There's always something going on. Always, always, always. I don't care how big or small where you live is, there's always something going on. You can just sit and watch. There'll be, it's boring for me because I've been doing it for decades and I do it all the time, but I guarantee you, if you don't do it all day, every day, it won't be boring. And just watch. I mean, the best way to see what it is to be there and observe it. And you can talk to people. Most people I've found are flattered to be the experts. So if you see a trial and something about it was interesting to you, just walk up to the lawyer afterwards and go, "Hey, you did a fantastic job. Do you mind if I ask you some questions?" Or, lawyers are easy to find because we don't want to be anonymous. So, you can find us in the bar directory, or you can find us by Googling our names or on our websites or on LinkedIn or wherever. We're easy to find. So you can always just make sure you get the lawyer's name and then contact them later if they're looking mad or exhausted or whatever right after the fact, and just email them the next day and say, "Hey, I saw you in court yesterday. I was really impressed with what you did. I'm writing this book. Do you mind if I ask you a question, or can I take you out for a cup of coffee?" Worst they say is no.
Great advice. Thank you. Melati, anything that you would add to the tips?
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add to that. I was going to say go to a court. That's the same. Like there's, just sit in there. There are, so many different courtrooms. There's always things happening. So if you go to one and it's getting boring or they're having too many kind of breaks or whatever, go sit in another one. You'll get an idea of what actually happens. So yeah.
Okay, that works. So, how can you maintain pacing while keeping court scenes believable? Melati, can I stay with you on this one?
Yeah, I actually find this quite hard to do because I'm always in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, no, that's not going to happen. That's going to take 6 weeks to get this piece of information. Like here, I mean, we've got a huge resource problem with getting DNA results. It doesn't, you can't just get it like that. It takes weeks and weeks and weeks. They've got a huge backlog, and we've only got like a small unit who does all the DNA kind of testing. So, you can't just, in a book, you can't just go, 6 weeks later, and then we got the DNA results. I actually find it difficult. But what I think needs to happen, I guess, is, and I don't know, I mean, Laurie might disagree with me on this, but you kind of have to cut some of that time out if you want to kind of maintain a little bit of. So my current book is a young adult. My current work in progress is a young adult book, and I'm actually struggling with this as well, because it's a crime book, and things need to happen within a short, like, space of 2 weeks in the whole book, and in reality, things can't happen in 2 weeks. Like, it's just not. You can't get from the beginning to the end of a whole case in that time. So I'm trying to just kind of cut out a lot of what happens. So I'm just being a little bit unrealistic in that sense, and trying to ignore the time differential. But besides that, I actually don't know. Maybe Laurie will have a better answer than me, because I'm kind of like, I can't. There's sometimes within fiction you can, I guess, play around with things because it's not a real book. I mean, it's not reality. So, in order to maintain pacing, especially in a fast-paced novel where you want things to happen one after the other, you can't really have it that realistic in that sense. So that's been my attempt at trying to maintain pacing, is just to cut out those big long time periods in between where nothing's happening in the real world, in a case in the real world. So yeah, I'll be interested to see what Laurie says about this.
Okay, Laurie, fill us in.
Well, I think you're right. You can kind of shorten some periods of time and things like that. And if you're writing a courtroom scene, no one wants to hear you lay the foundation for physical evidence, because, my gosh, I don't even want to hear it in an actual trial. Like, can't you just stipulate to that? Come on, we all know this photograph is getting in. Like, please, let's not do that. But there are times in stories where you can go, and 3 months later, I did that at one point in Devil's Defense, where because where I live in a relatively small town in the South, and things really do grind to a halt between Thanksgiving and New Year's. You can't get anything done. And so I just wrote that. I wrote, things came to a halt between Thanksgiving and New Year's, and they spend their time decorating for Christmas, and all of a sudden it was Super Bowl Sunday, and that's when things got cranking up again. And I mean, I wrote it a little better than that, but that's basically what I said. And I just kind of cut 3 months out there. Well, they were waiting because nothing would have happened between Thanksgiving and New Year's, and because nothing ever does happen between Thanksgiving and New Year's. And when people come to me in the beginning of November and they say how long it'll take, I always say not till February, because nothing's getting done between now and January. So you can, I think you can do that, and you just have to. I think as long as you're just skipping the boring parts and not changing the real parts, it's okay. Um, just like if you were to say, and mom baked a cake, you don't have to say, and then she put in a quarter teaspoon of vanilla because that's boring. You don't have to say all the steps in baking the cake. We all know you don't have to wait 45 minutes until the cake comes out of the oven. The cake comes out of the oven. And you wouldn't. And now that I think about it, that's kind of a good analogy because that happens all the time in books. Like someone puts something in the oven and then they have a conversation that would in real life would only last 5 minutes, and then they pull something out of the oven, but it would have taken an hour to cook, and nobody thinks anything of that. And I think that's kind of the same thing when you're shortening the time. It's That's what fiction is. I mean, fiction is fiction, and it's fiction. Like you don't have to take every step along the way to get from point A to point B. You just have to take a realistic route from point A to point B.
That makes sense. Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, so what is something you want writers to know or consider when writing court scenes? Lori, can I stay with you?
Sure. Um, please, please let a lawyer look at it before you publish it. I mean, most lawyers, maybe every lawyer, I might even say every lawyer has a novel in their desk drawer. Um, so it's not going to be hard to find a lawyer who will read that one scene and tell you, "Oh my God, that would never happen." I mean, it doesn't take that long to read just a few pages out of context. Um, and you'd be surprised how much we'll do in exchange for a cup of coffee and an acknowledgement in the acknowledgement sections. That it can really throw things off.
That makes sense. All right, Melati, anything that you would add?
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. Just getting someone to read over it, that scene. I guess I'd say just to the average person that the rules of evidence are a lot more restrictive than they're made out to be in the movies. So probably things that you can just think are going to get into a court, like be allowed to be presented in court, is not so easy. So yeah, go to a courtroom and see how difficult it is to get something before the court,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, just to take advice from a lawyer, particularly if the courtroom scene is a big part of your novel. Definitely just get someone to read over it. Yeah, that's about it. Oh yeah,
And not
also
all hearsay is inadmissible.
that's right. And also just one of the really simple ones is just a lawyer leading your witness. I mean, some leading questions are all right in terms of you just want to introduce someone or something like that, but you can't lead them through the whole thing, which is sometimes you see in the movies. And yeah, that's a bit of pet peeve.
But you can lead on cross.
Yes, that's right.
It's all complicated.
So yeah, your own witness. That's what I meant.
Yeah. That's why law school is 3 years and you spend the first 5 years committing malpractice because it's really hard.
Yeah, it's hard. There are a lot of rules that you don't know about.
Okay, so we're getting toward the end here. This is really our last question to wrap up our conversation. If you both had to judge a written courtroom scene, what in the storytelling would earn an automatic pardon and what would earn an automatic death penalty? Melati, can we start with you?
Oh, death penalty. Luckily, we don't have death penalty in Australia, so I'm a little bit pleased about that. I'm a bit nervous about the death penalty, but I would say I'll go with pardon. I think one thing that I think would really I'd really enjoy is for me when we're dealing with courtroom scenes, I prefer comedic ones because then I don't really have to. I can turn off and I can just enjoy the scene. So if they all broke out into song and dance, I'd be really happy with that. It's we talk about how boring it all is and everything, but occasionally some funny things do happen. I was in a trial once when the sheriff's officer, all of a sudden I was in the middle of leading DNA evidence, so it was really not it was not really intense part, but it was kind of technical, and the sheriff's office just kind of blurted out something about, oh, I used to love it when you did that, or something like that, like just really blurted it out just out of context. And that was a huge thing. Like she'd fallen asleep and all of a sudden she must have been dreaming or something and kind of blurted this out in front of the whole courtroom. And that ended up being a mistrial. So we had to start the whole thing again. But it was funny. And well, it wasn't that funny, actually. I wasn't. There was no victim in that case. It was more like a drug case. It wouldn't have been funny if anything happened. But it was okay in that there was no victim in the sense, and but it was an amusing thing to have happened. So sometimes things happen that are out of the ordinary. So for me, yes, if they all broke out in a song and dance, that would would be good.
Okay, you heard it here. We have a pardon. How about for you, Lori? Any automatic pardons or automatic death penalties?
Well, I just have to say that I had a case once where the judge shot the metal blinds with a BB gun in the middle of the trial because he was bored and was playing with our evidence. And that was probably the funniest moment I ever had in a trial. But then I got yelled at for not making sure all the BBs were out of the BB gun. And I did not say, well, I didn't ask you to pull the trigger now, did I? But anyway, the automatic death penalty for me is the surprise witness, like Melati said earlier. That drives me up a tree. You can't just pull people in off the street last minute and say, oh, they're going to testify. And we didn't tell anybody about it until the last minute. You have to give witnesses, you have to give notice of witnesses, and they have to have the opportunity to question them ahead of time. And it's just, that drives me batty. And also there are rules about when you can talk and when you can't, and who gets to question whom when. And first, the prosecution puts up its case, and then the defense puts up its case, and then the prosecution puts up its rebuttal. You don't get to mishmash that just because there's a witness that one of them didn't like or liked or something. And that just the order of things, that makes my skin crawl. So there's my automatic death penalty. And I think I'll agree that if you can get a good laugh out of me, that I'll forgive a lot of sins for a good hearty belly laugh.
Okay, perfect. So then now we know how to avoid the death penalty with our courtroom scenes.
I'll even do that in real court. Honestly, I once took $100 off of someone's fine because they made me laugh so hard.
So
I
now
probably
for
shouldn't say that
in your
out loud,
area.
but I did.
There might be some requests for you. All right, thank you so much. So that wraps up our panel today. I'd like to thank our panelists for their expertise in helping us on how to effectively write courtroom scenes. We will be in the chat a little bit longer to continue answering questions from our Red Hive 2025 attendees. But to wrap up, I was thinking we could actually go around and briefly let our viewers know what projects you might like to plug and even how to find you after the conference if you're willing to share your socials. So, Lori, is there anything you'd like to plug or let us know how we can find you?
Sure. Well, of course, I'd like to plug my series, the Fisher at Law series, which is Devil's Defense, is out now. Devil's Hand is coming out October 7th of 2025. Devil's Name is in the works, will be coming out fall of 2026. Uh, Devil's Defense, the audiobook just came out on April 29th. And the more you buy, the fewer lawyers there will be in the world, because if I can quit being a lawyer, I'll do it. You can find me at loriduffwrites.com and on most social media at loriduffwrites.
Perfect. Thank you. Melati, is there anything you'd like to plug or would you like to share how we can find you after the conference?
Yeah, just my series is it's a middle grade series that's out. I've got it's the Aisha Den series. You can find that by Googling it. My website is melbyrosepublishing.com, and my Instagram is melati.lum. I have my Melby Rose Publishing is releasing a book by Annie McCann, which is a middle grade book that's coming out this June. And that's adventure, mystery, cultural, Indonesian culture immersion. And yeah, so mainly middle grade. I do have some YA coming up. Hopefully, I don't know when that's going to be published though. And I have the manga that's in the works as well. So that might be a year or so for that to be released. So yeah, melbyrosepublishing.com.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so that does it for this panel. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching, and we can't wait to see you over on the Discord. On behalf of Write Hive, thanks for joining us. We'll see you soon.